Well, yeah, the first, I mean, is everyone kind of training clients online? That'd be my first thing. Is everyone doing some virtual sessions? Sweet. So yeah, you may have found the same stuff that I've found, but like one of the things that I've found really tricky, or that's been difficult is like, oh, is that Eddie? No, it's frozen. It's frozen in quite a pose there as well. That's great. So like this kind of stuff, basically the awkwardness of like the online interaction and like using Zoom calls and stuff. And I found it easier with one-to-one than it is in groups like this. I find groups like this really can be really, really tricky. But what I've found is really useful, and it'd be interesting to hear what you guys have done as well. But one of the things that I find really difficult is keeping the conversation going like I would normally do in a PT session. So normally in a PT session, I could sort of set someone off with some mobility drills or something at the beginning of the session. I can like, if they're like rotating this way, I can like wander around them on the gym floor and just chat to them, and then they go the other way and I can go the other way. So we can like keep a dialogue going and they know that they're supposed to just carry on exercising. Whereas I found like really awkward moments in the first few sessions I did virtually where it was like, they go, what? And then I'm turning the other way, they're turning the other way, you can't hear the audio, they're then stopping, they're looking at the screen. There's a little break in the audio, and then like the whole session intensity and flow and everything just got completely derailed. And I was also noticing that those people I wasn't having as much conversation with during session, that we were managing to get through more volume of work in the session than we would have in the face-to-face sessions. So I don't know if I just chat too much during my sessions with my clients or whatever, but it's like, but actually those people are like starting to comment on, oh, actually I feel like I'm getting through a little bit more, like we're doing a little bit more stuff here. And so what I've done is actually just kind of restructured sessions with clients, actually introduced the idea to them and just said, look, it is more difficult to have conversations now during session. So let's just not try. Let's not try and like trudge our way through these awkward like conversations and interactions. Let's just say that you're going to get more volume in for like 30, 40 minutes. And then I've now started to just deliberately allow time. I was like, I'll draw up the session somewhere about 6-7 minutes out. And it gives us a chance at the end to have 5 minutes where we can just chat normally without you trying to exercise as well. And what I've found is that people are quite happy now to just kind of smash through the session. So I'm getting more out of my clients in that time. They're doing more effective exercise because we're just focusing completely on the session. And then at the end, we've got this really nice chance to continue to catch up and have a chat about things that are going on and also planning for next session. And I'm kind of keeping them updated about where the program is going and this kind of stuff. And so we've got all the chance to chat that we normally had, but without any of that kind of awkwardness of trying to do it in the normal way that I normally would have. So I've restructured the sessions now, and I'm finding that's way more effective, both for getting some volume through the session and getting some workload in there, and also being able to keep up with them. It's kind of like create a bit of a win-win. So if you haven't already, you may have already tried that, but I would definitely introduce that to clients. And the more chin waggy they are, like the more I'd introduce it, because it just seems to be able to get people to really refocus, which has been great. And then the other thing with communication is that obviously the topic of communication for me with my clients at least would be like a lot of work-based stuff, what's going on for them with their families or their partners or outside of their sessions. And then occasionally I get them to talk about, what we're supposed to be focusing on or like what they're doing with their program, whatever, if I really coerce them into it. Whereas what I was finding in those first few sessions are just getting conversations about COVID-19 all the time, because everyone was in the same boat. I was finding like with those clients who are a bit sarcastic and a bit aloof, they were fine with it because they're just like, oh, it's all shit, we'll just get on with it. Whereas with some of my clients, it genuinely was sort of, I don't want to spend 5 to 10 minutes of this session talking about something that's going to just genuinely make you depressed about the state of your job or the world or anything like that. And I was finding it quite difficult to steer conversation towards things that were more positive and actually then leave them, send them out of the session where they were feeling a bit more positive. So I've kind of almost gone through now and sort of from a process of like doing lots of sessions with my clients, actually found a load of opportunities or topics, things that are positive about the lockdown that are almost opportunities that wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for the lockdown. And now I'm deliberately sort of keeping that list roughly in my mind as I weave conversations with clients at the end of their sessions. So in that last 5 or 7 minutes per session, I'm focusing on things like, some of my clients have really removed their commute time, which can be very stressful, full train, all that kind of stuff. Whereas now, just even pointing out to them like, oh, how is it in the morning, kind of getting up, having a cup of tea, taking your dressing gown off, putting your gym kit on, and you're straight into a session. And it's like, oh yeah, actually that's quite good. Whereas before it's like, oh, I'm not going into work, my normal routine's all over the place. So just like reframing a lot of the way that they're looking at this lockdown to try and make sure that the conversations we have are optimistic and also focused on things that they can control or that they can improve. So definitely the commute has been a big win for conversation wise, because people don't tend to enjoy it that much. Ease of getting ready for sessions is another one. And also when you finish your session, you're in your own environment. There's no need to kind of, if I do some breathing or relaxed stretching with someone at the end of a session, or even some like meditation, then sending them back out of the gym onto the tube and go back to work, it's kind of all my work is kind of undone at that point, because they're just like, oh, this is so stressful again. Whereas now they can stay in that space after the session for a little bit longer. So a couple of my clients who do finish with a bit more relaxed end to the session are now reporting that like they're coming back and saying, oh, I felt so relaxed for like half a day, as opposed to getting back to work and immediately being hammered by stress because I was back in the office environment. So I think environment is one that I'm talking about for clients, both to like arrange their gym environment, but also think about the environment they're in like an hour or two after the session, see if they can prolong how good the session makes them feel. And then of course, what's happening now is they're coming back and going, oh, can we do another session? Can we do another session? Because it's become almost like more of a mental well-being process than it has about the physical training thing. That finding clients are way more in touch with that side of it than maybe they would have been previously. So it's kind of like that session now sets me up for the day, and actually my morning is now way less stressful and way more enjoyable because I'm controlling it and I'm designing it. So I work and the train systems are not getting in the way. So I think that's been a nice thing to be able to, again, steer the conversation towards, to kind of move around some of that awkwardness about negative chats. Establishing routines is another one that I've been talking to clients about. Again, just being a bit more positive about the fact that people can design their day now much more fluidly. And before, I found that clients were in a bit of a habitual pattern of the way of doing things, as we all do. And that's obviously been that a lot of that habit's been broken, which otherwise you would never really get the opportunity to have a clean sweep across all of your clients for that to be true. So I'm kind of actually highlighting that to clients and saying, look, every single one of my clients has just had exactly the same experience as you. They're now completely changed their working day, and their structure of their week is all been thrown up. So what a great time to actually redesign some of your rituals and some of your habits, and focus on, not everyone has access to like heavy weights and gym equipment and purpose-built facilities like they did before. It's like, well, why not compensate then by focusing on some of the other habits that you actually didn't maybe have much of a chance to focus on before, like nutrition and kind of well-being, and sleep and rest and recovery and those things. So again, having conversations with clients about that on a much more frequent basis than I would have managed before, or maybe not just the frequency, but also just the success of those conversations being higher, because people are not walking past Pret and going in and self-medicating with a massive latte full of cream or whatever. They're not having that opportunity, not going out for restaurant meals as much. So there are other opportunities that have opened up somewhere else in the, I guess, in the sort of world of their sort of fitness. So I'm trying to focus on those things just as much as I am on the training, because I didn't want to get in conversations with my clients where it was like, I was saying, well, this training's not quite as good as the training you do in the gym because you don't have as much load, or we don't have a barbell. It was actually not having those conversations and having conversations about what they can do with the rest of their day that's positive, I think has also produced some good results. And then probably the last one on nutrition is obviously home cooking. Has been like a massive topic for me to talk to pretty much all my clients about. A few different strategies that have worked and a few different things that have helped, I guess, the smoothness of those conversations around nutrition, and it not being focusing on something like, oh, you don't really home cook very much, so you're not going to be very good at this, but let's try this. It's been, there's a few different restaurants where you can order food from. You can get big hampers of food from sort of favorite restaurants and stuff like we usually never had the opportunity to do before. So sending clients towards those websites so they can order food and then create recipes at home, sharing recipes that I've made and then getting them to share them back with me. So I'm kind of cooking their food and then sharing that back with them. That's been a really unique opportunity, which for some clients, they would just never eat at home, ever. So that's been really good and much easier to control portion sizes and make some of those decisions. So I've been talking to clients about that side of things as well, which seems to have had quite a positive impact on the way that that's been received and how easy they find it to get into that habit versus how persuasive restaurant food and the ease and the convenience of those options are when they're in their normal working patterns and in their offices. A couple of my clients have like restaurants or cafes in the office as well. So obviously not being around those makes it more difficult to pick up the kind of foods that might make sticking to their diet more difficult. So those are kind of some of the things from like a conversational point of view, and be interested to hear what you guys have done with your clients as well. But those are some of the things that I kind of jotted down that I found really useful. And then from more of like a training point of view, like the actual sessions themselves, I found queuing was just like, so obviously I've lost all of my hands-on queuing stuff. So immediately it was like, I can't adjust anyone's body position. So that's going to change it. And then having to use way more verbal cueing. But even demoing is sometimes quite difficult because getting camera angles right and kind of lighting and things like that can be quite changeable. So I was then finding much more success by describing the upcoming exercises in much more detail before they've actually got to them. And I think people who did over classes probably get into the swing of this anyway and probably do this far more naturally because they've got a whole group of people who, you need to get the same message across to everyone in a slightly different way so that everyone understands what it is you want them to do. But I found that that kind of proactive cueing of like, okay, these are the next 2 exercises coming up. I'm going to describe them in full first. I'm going to tell you how many reps and sets we're going to do, and then I'm going to set you off, and I'm going to shut up, basically, because I've found that trying to interject while someone's actually doing the exercise, if they don't quite hear it or the audio doesn't quite click into my microphone before theirs, they miss the first beat of what I said, and then they're like, what? And then they're stopping. It just disrupts the whole rhythm and the intensity of the exercise. And also queuing stuff, if somebody's far back from the screen, I've got some people doing it on their phone, it's like they have to like lean in, and then they lean in and stop, and then they go, okay, I'll go back into it now. But if that exercise, which it was a couple of times in the early sessions, was like designed to be time under tension focused because they've got less weight, it was then like straight out of that exercise, and then they go back in and do the second half of the set. But that was quite easy, and it's like it was because you didn't build up the fatigue because I stopped you midway through. So I was kind of getting out of the way of my clients doing the exercises. Really, I think it's probably what I'm trying to say, but certainly stops people from like checking the screen as much or having to lean in and watch me midway through. So that's definitely been really useful as well. And because because I've got less weight to use in a lot of people's sessions, I tend to use supersets and circuits a little bit more to try and compensate with repetitions and sets for the lack of maybe load, rather than going for, which I have with some people in some instances, but rather than going for like more complex movements that I'm having to teach them online, because it's more difficult then to teach a more complex version of that exercise and keep the intensity high. So because I've been using a lot of supersets and things like that, it's given me a good opportunity to describe it all in advance. And then I think even, I guess, in addition to that and further to that, so describing the exercise that's about to come up as they're approaching the end of their set has also been something that's allowed people to just, the difference is I've seen them then just switch straight over to the next exercise because they can just hear me going on at them in the background. So, okay, you've got 3 left. Once you finish that third rep, we're just going to go switch straight over to this exercise. And then there's no break in the session. There's no kind of pausing to look at the screen or any of that awkwardness. So I found that's taken a lot of the delays out of sessions as well and really kind of helped them flow. And then clients are like, oh, that feels like it does in the gym. And then there isn't this kind of perception that a home workout's not quite as effective, or, that kind of stuff is, you don't get that. And then people are just kind of going, oh, yeah, it's just like being in the gym. So that kind of stuff has been really useful from a queuing perspective. And I'm sure there's more stuff as well. And I'm sure you guys have experienced some similar bits, but I've had a few like faux pas that have led me to like change the way that I'm doing it. So it's not that I just kind of knew exactly what to do, but it's been an interesting like learning experience, for sure. So I was going to talk a little bit about kind of programming and stuff as well, but what have you guys, I don't know what you guys have found on like communication stuff. Have you found any of the similar sort of bits to what I've just gone through?
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple of times where you've mentioned it's been really difficult to cue people. And there's been a couple of exercises sometimes where I've just filmed it after the session, like I've just kind of gone with it and go, well, we'll just move on. After the session, I've filmed myself properly doing it, explaining it with a number of different cues, and then sending it to the client afterwards so they can kind of look at it and pause it and do whatever they need to do to try and understand it and try it a few times themselves. And then in the next session, we've gone back to it and gone, oh, how did you find the video I made afterwards? Do you understand it a bit better now? And then we just go through it again. And if we've got any other questions, we'll do it. But obviously it's not every exercise, but there's just been once or twice where it's just been like, oh, that went really badly, so let's try it this way. And that's worked out quite well. So yeah, that was my addition.
I love you sent and pictures as well. It's like either so one of them I've got people doing is a pipes handstand hold, and in the space where I'm coaching now, I've got like a tiny stool, but I can't really demo it here. So I'll just send pictures before the session, or video myself before going through something and be like, oh, this is what I want you to do. It's like things I know they're capable of, but might be a bit tricky for me to demo. So I'm like, oh, okay, I know how that should look. So I've learned that too. I thought that was effective.
Yeah, I think also things that people are not as used to using, like band positioning. So like there's so many different ways of kind of attaching a band to a bar and increasing the load. But if I normally wouldn't have used that with them, I would have just added some more kilos onto a bar or picked up a heavier set of dumbbells or kettlebells. That is kind of like, I've done exactly what you guys are saying, like just sent them some videos of like, look, these are different, and these are what I'm going to call them. I don't know what they're called elsewhere, but we're just going to call this one a Y grip and a W grip, and then I'll send them over to you. And then during session, you created a bit of a language that works a bit quicker. Sorry, Pricey, I think you're going to say something.
That's right. Yeah, I think in terms of what you're saying about trying to almost not be interrupting your client when they're doing the exercises and making sure they can kind of maximize the time they're training, it's almost an argument for exercises your client can do well, almost trumping exercises that might potentially maybe be better in some regards, but it's like we want to prioritize things that your client can execute properly in the session. So that's one thought process. I think that's a great idea of sending the video demos through. That's something I'm doing a lot with my online clients who, again, it's programming quite simply and sending them tutorial videos so I know they're doing everything right. Just something I was going to say about the communication, and like you were saying there, Russ, about it not like being less kind of small talk and a bit more focused on the training. I think in terms of like matching energy and things like this, in this setting, you really have to be the energy of the class, perhaps, or the session, perhaps more so than you would be in the gym. So when a client comes into our gym or another gym, they're already in a gym setting. There's other people working out. There's music on. It's already a kind of like energetic environment. And often with clients, I might take a tone which is a little bit more chilled to make them feel a bit more comfortable in that. But in this setting, you're going into someone's living room where they're used to sitting watching TV or having a cup of tea, and it's very chilled energy. So that thing about maybe less small talk, a bit more sounding like a fitness DVD at times, maybe might actually be appropriate for them to be like, cool, I mean, this person's entered my room and now it's all energy, go, go, go kind of stuff.
Mr. Motivator.
Yeah, for sure. I think like you've got to create the environment, haven't you? And I think that's even down to things like lighting and airflow and those kind of things as well, which I guess less to do with kind of communication stuff, which I was kind of touching on, but certainly like, yeah, environment, like designing the gym environment is also your words as well and your kind of energy. Yeah, I'll crack on and chat through some of the more programming bits, because I think they've been quite interesting, like learning curves as well, and just changing what I've been doing there. And it's not totally different to what I would do in the gym, but I think it's just brought certain aspects of programming a little bit more to the forefront of my thinking. So just in terms of keeping people progressing, I did see a couple of posts go up online like early when we went into lockdown, just saying, now it's just about maintaining, people aren't going to make progress because they haven't got weights and that kind of stuff. And I guess it's kind of tempting to think that, but I've had quite a few clients who've made quite significant progress. And I think from an exercise selection point of view, the way that I've approached it is having a series of exercise continuums. So because I'm kind of limited on equipment, perhaps, I've created different continuums for exercises depending on whether that client's working on, maybe it's strength, or maybe it's muscle building, maybe it's muscular endurance, whatever it might be, proprioception and skill. And then, because those continuums might start in the same place, but they sort of, they head off in slightly different directions. So with variations around that exercise. So like for instance, like kind of strength continuums, for those clients who haven't got loads of equipment or no equipment at all, what I look at is progressively trying to increase the use of body weight and levers to make that exercise more difficult, or to increase the load by decreasing the amount of limbs they're using towards that same exercise. So like simply just kind of taking someone from an elevated press up, where obviously the lever is in favor of more weight being in the feet than it is in the hands, makes it easier. Obviously then down to a normal press up, feet elevated. And then from there, it's a kind of a process of taking the limbs away so that more load is being directed through particular muscles that I'm trying to focus on with strength. So removing a leg is going to place more emphasis and load through obliques and through core because of the instability. And then taking obviously a hand away. Sometimes you need to take a hand away and go back to an elevated single arm press up, because the jump from 2 to 1 is too difficult. So I just have like a continuum in my head of the difficulty of that exercise in terms of what the strength requirements are. And then I've just progressed them through those variations so that they don't need to, pick up a barbell or a kettlebell, whatever it might be. Whereas with things like muscular endurance, or even what's good for like learning a skill and proprioception and skill, that kind of thing, where repetition is very important, it's like looking at things like time under tension. So I look at like reducing the amount of joint lockout that an exercise has to increase the time under tension for a muscle group. So for instance, if I've got like a lunge, rather than do like a walking lunge or a reverse lunge where you've got a standing part to that exercise, just simply doing the same number of reps, same number of sets, same exercise, but just simply not locking out the knee at the top. For me, I've highlighted that to the client that that's the progression, but the result of that progression will be towards muscular endurance as opposed to strength, because it just works differently in terms of how much time under tension. So I think that's been a nice process, and sort of for each exercise that I might be getting a client to do, just highlighting what the road to progressing that exercise might be. And even down like speed and explosive and ballistic movements, there's obviously ways of like limiting how much force is required. So one of my clients just doing speed skaters, so just kind of jumping from one foot to the other, sideways, laterally. And for him, initially it was just kind of about distance that we're traveling, but then all we did was just put like a barrier in the middle. So now it's kind of about distance and height. So it just needs to be gradually more and more explosive every time. So then he can see himself like measuring himself getting stronger at that movement. So I think that's been super useful when there's less equipment. So just knowing how to vary the exercise has been really useful. And then progressing like volume as opposed to load. So been very busy in rest periods with extra mobility work and extra kind of movement patterning stuff, so that the session density is far greater. Because I don't have a big heavy barbell to tire someone out with where they need 45 seconds rest or whatever. Reducing rest periods as well. So shorter rest periods has been like a feature of sessions for sure, whereas previously they might have been a bit longer to recover. Probably by the sounds of it for me to chat in, to be honest. But certainly now, like for them to be working through those rest periods. And then the final thing I think for me on like programming, it's been really interesting and I've never had the chance to do or never really thought about before, is the intensity of the sessions that I was trying to get clients to do before was because they were compacting all of their physical activity for the day, or most of it, into like an hour or 55 minutes in a session. But now they're not leaving the flat or the house. And so do I need that much accumulated fatigue from doing exercises back to back to back when someone's not getting up from their chair to even commute anymore? There's like a drop in physical activity levels. So like, what happens if I just stretch that session out over the course of the day? Now I've got this massive opportunity for volume which doesn't create the fatigue that creates the DOMS or the soreness or the, lack of inclination to train again the next day. So I can like give crazy targets, or what would previously have seemed like crazy targets to my clients, in terms of like, do this many squats every time you go past your barbell or your kettlebell, do this many squats, which would have just been crazy to suggest doing it in an hour before. But now I've got clients like picking up a kettlebell every time they go past it and doing a few squats, or trying to hit try and hit 250 squats in a day. But there's no associated knee pain or no DOMS the next day or anything, because they've had 3/4 of an hour in between every single time they've picked the kettlebells up. So I've done that with loads of clients, and like, just to try and look at physical activity in a different way, because it's not coming from the commute anymore. It's not coming from moving around the office or at lunchtime or, doing any of those things. So trying to get it in by what would have been more traditional gym exercises before. And that's been great. That's been really, really good, because I've given people some outrageous targets, and then they've actually kind of gamified their physical activity. I don't know if you guys have done any of that kind of stuff those are my two main points, I think, on programming.
I've done a bit of exercise snacking. So one of my clients has got a pull-up bar. So instead of doing them in the session, I've just given him a target. So as a little break, like, try and build up your pull-ups throughout the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've trying to. Oh, sorry. Go on, Monty. I've been trying to, include stuff throughout the day, but also use what you were talking about at the beginning of the session in terms of reducing stress. Use them both. So trying to make it lighthearted and silly. So calling something bog squats. So every time they go to the toilet, do squats, or every time they get an email that frustrates them, do 30 seconds of air punches, just to try and bring some humor and light to it as well. And I found that they've loved that. That's been really helpful for the mind.
That's good. I'm stealing that. Yeah, it's great. I'm sure there are more ideas as well, but those have been the biggest sort of changes for me, I think, since going virtual. And actually, I've been wholly positive, like, across the board. Clients are doing more exercise. It's a more important part of the day. It seems to have jumped up the priority list. I don't know about you guys, what you found, but yeah, go on, Pricey.
I think just your point on this idea of trying to sell it, that it's not that thing about people can only maintain during this period of time and things like this, and trying to counter some of that narrative that exists. I think outside of potentially like absolute strength gains, so people actually getting maximal lifts stronger, I don't think there's many goals that can't be improved very well in this period of time. I think it can be a bit of a cop-out, certainly something I've taken personally with my own training, in terms of just not doing anything because it's like I can't go to the gym. But the reality is, there's plenty of people who doing like a program that's going to move their press ups and being able to do 10 to do 20, or not being able to do a press up to learn to do a press up. Like, that's going to get people stronger. It's going to help them build muscle. There's, pistol squats, various different types of lunges and things. There's plenty to be getting on with in terms of anything from like an aesthetic point of view. In terms of like core training is pretty much unaffected for most people in terms of the amount of volume you could do with that, body weight stuff. And then just more time for focusing on nutrition as well, in terms of like, if people actually want to apply themselves to it, there's no reason why this opportunity can't be maximized and people can make huge progress. Like I say, with the exception of absolute strength. So I think it's just whether or not that ends up happening is kind of irrelevant. It's just you need to be the voice of that reason to your client, which is not just being like, well, the best we can sort of hope to do is X or Y, rather than this is a great opportunity to do this. You're not spending 2 hours a day on the train. You've got extra time back. You can train more frequently. You're not going to restaurants and drinking loads of alcohol. You can focus on your nutrition. It's kind of how you spin it to your client is how they're going to interpret it. And I think, there's a lot of garbage about how difficult it is to train at home.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of window of opportunity is slightly different for each one of my clients, just in terms of what's changed most about their day and then what their goals are. I think it just makes it slightly different for each person, but just trying to find out what the change, and like chatting to each one of my clients about what the changes are for them, and what they're struggling with, and then kind of seeing where those opportunities are. Like clients taking up skipping and cycling and stuff like that, if I'd have suggested that before, I don't think it would have been met with like anywhere near as much enthusiasm, whereas now it suddenly seems to have been something they've picked up. So yeah, loads of opportunity, and it's been super positive like experience between me and my clients, which is something that I think could have been really, really negative and hard to handle, and it just hasn't been that.
Sorry to interrupt, guys, but we are running out of time.
Sorry for rambling for so long, guys. Thank you so much for listening to my
the end. That would be why. But no, I found that really useful. I hope everyone else did. And Faye, how did you find that?
Very useful, yes, thank you. It's always nice to hear from other people, to know, everyone's going through the similar kind of things as well, if anything. It's obviously, as much as we're trying to boost everyone else's mental health at this time, we kind of need it too. So it's nice to hear that other people are going through the same thing, because with me being slightly different, because all my clients one-to-one were in Paris. There's only been a few that have been wanting to do online stuff, and they've got it a lot worse there. So it's like, I've got to really bite my tongue if I'm like, oh, I went out for a run today, and I went, oh, nope, you can't do that. So it's just, I've got to bite my tongue a bit more. And it is hard on that mental health side of like, how are you? Oh, that's right, I haven't been outside.
Yeah, no. But yeah, guys, I think it's going to kick us off.
So yeah, away from COVID and everything that's happening. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's just, okay, I think, it might kick us off any second. So if we all say bye now, and yeah, we'll do another one next week. Thank you very much, Russ. Lovely to meet you, Hayley.
Thank you, Russ.
Cheers. Bye, guys.
See you later, guys.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.